Diablo 4 has been a well-known ARPG in the gaming industry, but now it may have some competition.
It all leads back to me.
Heroes! In this video, we look at 12 comparisons to identify who we believe comes out on top when it comes to performance and quality of life between Diablo 4 and Last Epoch. Make note that enjoyment and judgment in any game is solely that of the player. This is primarily a good resource to see what may be different between both and why one may be a better fit for you than the other. Number 12. Loot filtering. Once we finish a dungeon or get past destroying multitudes of enemies, we then have to rifle through the loot on the ground and identify what works and what doesn't. And sometimes you get to a point where you just don't care about lower rarities and they can accidentally take up space in your inventory. This is where Last Epoch has its benefits. The built-in filtration system allows you to specify directly what you don't want shown or interacted with. So, if I no longer want to see common items, I can ask for those to be hidden. But it goes much further than that, because if you know that you only want to use two-handed weapons, you can also tell it to hide single-handed weapons, for example. And can even go as far as telling it to only show weapons or gear with a specific trait on it. This tool makes loot gathering more versatile and easier, as the loot you see and can pick up is the one that can help your build. Not to mention, you can override the filter by pressing X on your keyboard and see what's on the ground. But why bother? Epoch gets the win for this tool. 11. Gameplay. Both Diablo and Last Epoch have similarities in gameplay. Reach an area, kill monsters, complete a mission, etc. etc. However, Last Epoch has its moments that I have experienced where you at times cannot click on the items to pick them up, or target enemies at all unless you're performing an AoE attack. Not to mention some glitches with the abilities that won't activate unless you teleport back into town. And small moments of stuttering and performance degradation. For Diablo, other than some rubber banding during high peak times early in the game's existence, speaking for myself only, the game plays relatively smoothly, and picking up items and attacking enemies have been streamlined. For this reason, I give Diablo the favor of gameplay, but that's not to say that Last Epoch is bad in any way. It still stays strong with great performance during times of insanity on screen, and its upcoming full release may change this decision. Number 10. Terrain details. The surrounding environments is always important in any game, and both Diablo and Last Epoch delivers on this front, but in their own way. Diablo has gone back to its darker days where the environment is a bit more dark and secluded, whereas Last Epoch is more vibrant and colorful. Even with the different regions for Diablo 4, the feel for all areas seems similar, from moderate foliage to dust-ridden dunes and destroyed landscape. They keep the dreadful coloring and brightest consistency throughout. Epoch, however, varies, from bright landscapes and vibrant coloring, and depending on the timelines you're a part of, that same landscape can change in appearance and paint a picture of the damage that was done with it. Not to mention that both games do well in the details around the terrain, with Diablo 4 being a bit more busy with items and small details, making the landscape feel alive. Both have the strengths in this category, therefore I believe both should be identified for it. Number 9. Game Guide. ARPGs can seem a bit daunting for new players, and if that new player doesn't want to take the time to do their own research, it could turn them away. Even though Diablo is a pretty simplistic ARPG, there are some questions that you would need to search elsewhere for the answers. This is where Last Epoch excels. They have a built-in game guide for any questions the players may have. A truly detailed database that if a new player wishes to go further details on what this skill is or what this effect does, simply search and the guide will assist in finding you the necessary information all within the game. It's a fantastic tool that helps people learn what some things do and how to play the game all within one area. This is what Last Epoch excels in, and I believe it is a fantastic resource tool. 8. Resource management. Crafting is one of the most important aspects in ARPGs, and resources are a driving force you can get for your character. And I find that in Diablo and Last Epoch those can vary. Last Epoch resources come in the form of modifier ruins, shards, and support glyphs, whereas Diablo has a wide variety of resources in which some you can transmog into other resources. Not to mention that attaining and storage is also a bit different, as this is where I say Diablo does it better. In Diablo, any resource item found on the ground is an automatic pickup that goes to a separate inventory system, not bothering your main one. Whereas in Last Epoch, the resources you find are left on the ground until you decide to click on one. Then all within that area are collected by that one click. But the biggest issue I have is that once you pick them up, they are left in your inventory until you click another button to move them into their own resource slots. I just feel there are a lot of unnecessary steps in Last Epoch to get the items into their allocated locations, even though there is a lot less of them. Some could argue this and say that they go into your inventory because they sell or trade them with other characters. And I can understand this, but for 80% to 90% of the player base who don't do this, it's just an extra step that makes it more tedious and frustrating. So for this, Diablo gets my vote. Number 7. Weapon altering specifics. Both Last Epoch and Diablo have a weapon altering mechanic. However, Last Epoch is able to blow Diablo out of the water with theirs. Diablo allows the player to alter or change out one affix on a weapon, and fingers crossed you have enough money and resources to do this a few times to get what you specifically want. And once accepted, you can no longer change anything out of that piece of gear. Whereas in Last Epoch, you have a much more different approach, allowing you to change out, strengthen, and add specific traits to your weapon using the Forge. The more forging potential you have on a weapon, the more times you can improve it, change, and make your own. It provides a wide range of possibilities that focus heavily on the user builds, and the ruins and items you receive are in abundance, with a few that are specialties and rare materials. This freedom for modification gives the player a way to alter and improve an item how they want to play, from specific damage types to leeching affixes and prefixes, and so much more. The possibilities are endless, and there is still so much more depth in Last Epoch that we just haven't covered here. Number 6. Gearing. Both Diablo and Last Epoch focus on the gear the player uses. The better the gear, the better damage and mitigation you have. However, both games have two different ways of handling gear. For example, when you find a piece of gear in Diablo, you have the added effects such as a damage or protection dependent on the type of gear piece you find. And if it's early game, the higher the item power, it's just recommended to use it. However, in Last Epoch, there is no item power. You have a base attack rate, alongside damage, and the weapon's affix and prefix. But it's what those special abilities of the weapon do that's beneficial. If you already have an idea of a base build you want to go off of, such as Ignite, also known as fire damage, you can find very early weaponry that focuses on fire damage, and that base weapon can be used for a long period of time unless something else comes up. And this coincides with all gear types in Last Epoch. You can find ways to become extremely powerful early on in the game without having to wait for the top best gear. Not to mention that legendary items don't depict on what build you should go off of. Any weapon in Last Epoch, early or late, can have a massive effect on your build if they have the right affixes and or prefixes. I find Last Epoch's clever gearing mechanics manage to take the ball and run with it. Number 5. Direction. Sometimes direction is a big help to the player. This is where I believe Diablo 4 has the upper hand. Being one large map, the ability to go from point A to point B without loading is super easy and effective in helping the player identify where they need to go, especially since you can pin on the map and the game will give you the best pathway to get there. Last Epoch doesn't do this. As a matter of fact, based on some feedback I've gotten before, the map system can be a bit confusing at first, especially with the different time zone areas. But with time, the player will get used to the map system. But the biggest issue some have is that when they load into a map, there is a simple icon that just points where the mission is. And if the map you're in is big, it won't pop up until you get closer to the area. Whether this is a bug or by default is unknown. However, this gives a sense of exploration for the player, and drives them to explore and find what they're looking for rather than simply going to an area and being directed where to go. Another issue I have with Last Epoch map system is that if you need to teleport back into town to sell items and come back, the map that you have already discovered becomes hidden again, and you need to rediscover everything once again, which can be a bit annoying. I also do find the Diablo journal a lot easier for newcomers to follow, so for the direction aspect and the ease of identifying where you need to go, Diablo 4 does it a bit better. Number 4. Map overlay. To work off of point 5, the map system in itself is a discovery style of mapping. In Diablo, once you discover the map, it remains discovered as you progress throughout the seasons. But in Last Epoch, the map requires to be discovered to find points of interest, and sometimes the mini-map on the side is just not enough. So activate the overlay. Yes, Last Epoch holds true to the former Diablo mechanic, where you can have an overlay over top the gameplay so you can visually see where you are and your teammates are. Last Epoch also allows you to adjust the opacity so it shouldn't be so bright. Overall, this map mechanic was a bit of a letdown when Diablo 4 decided to not bring it back, and Last Epoch's edition of it puts it in my preferred map overlay game. Number 3. Game stories. ARPG storylines are at times a little unnecessary for the player. Not everyone, but for some they just want to go about rampaging the lands of enemies and just hitting missions and completing them. When it comes to story concepts, Diablo 4 takes a cake on this one. And the reason why is the fact that cutscenes utilize your own character and make it feel special, and let the story dive deeper into the lore of the game and what made Sanctuary what it is. Last Epoch has an interesting story as well regarding the Epoch crystals and allowing time travel between lands, but it doesn't keep an interesting approach, and many just seem to skip through the story to get on with the game and lead to endgame. Not saying people don't do this with Diablo 4, but the method of telling a story in Diablo provides the player with a more personal take on ARPG storytelling. And that is why I think Diablo beats out Last Epoch. Before we get to our final two and probably the most important comparisons, I do ask, leave a like to the video and sub to the channel. And if you're enjoying the video so far, let me know in the comments what you enjoy more and if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Number 2. Beginner friendly. The biggest draw I believe for a lot of people is ease of understanding the game. And when it comes to both Diablo and Last Epoch, both have their advantages. However, one I believe is good for beginners, and I have to say due to its simplicity, Diablo takes this one. Diablo systems are simple to understand on its own. It's not Path of Exiles in any way, and you can easily learn and understand from a beginner's point of view what you need to do. Diablo's UI is easy to understand, and its ability to direct a player is another really beneficial tool. There's not much to say in the way of Diablo as in itself, it's an easy to understand game for beginners. Last Epoch is a much more detailed game, and its skill tree and passive trees can seem a bit daunting to newcomers. Even with its built-in game guide, the system can still turn some people away with the vast amount of possibilities. So for this reason, I will say that the most simplistic skill tree and UI layout and direction in Diablo would be a better suited for newcomers to the ARPG genre. Number 1. Far more builds. The final item is the builds available for in-game. Diablo's simplistic skill tree limits the amount of builds a player can have. Not to mention that there are only 5 character classes you can pick from with no subclasses available. Diablo has the ability to do their builds well. However, there's not much to them, other than the 5 classes with specific types of builds that you can work off of, and that's about it. This is where Last Epoch goes above and beyond. Last Epoch has similar 5 classes, but within those classes there are 3 subclasses you can specialize into, with Falconeer and Warlock being available at full release on February 21st. This means that in Last Epoch there are a total of 20 different classes you can play, which then encompasses a number of different builds you can mix and match. The diversity in Last Epoch is above and beyond that of Diablo 4, and provides you with massive replayability and trial and error. It's unbelievable the amount of builds you can achieve in Last Epoch and the different style of gameplay you can experience. So if you want the ability to dive deep into your character and truly specialize them in your own way, Last Epoch is for you. There you go folks, this is my list of 12 comparisons between Diablo and Last Epoch, and this is primarily a summary of who comes out on top. In the end, these games are intended to provide a player a fun and enjoyable experience, and I've always believed that anyone can play and enjoy whatever game they feel would meet their enjoyment factor. Diablo, I believe, has a more simplistic appeal to it, with a much deeper and lore-driven story that brings a player's character into the world of Sanctuary, whereas Last Epoch may be lacking in the story-driven aspect, but makes up for in the better gearing, teaching, and customization for class and builds that for me surpasses Diablo hands down. So, what do you enjoy? Have you tried either game and loved one more than the other, or has this video helped you decide which one you'll be trying out? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to hit that like and sub to the channel as it helps tremendously. Also make sure to follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/HealPleaseHeal, where we do play Last Epoch and Diablo 4 as well, and we stream every Friday and Sunday. Thank you for watching, and remember to heal, please heal.